Maximiliano Neo Terra Nova was determined to find the perfect alchemy where health, healing, and miracles were not unattainable for everyone. He was entirely sure that healing was possible without having to look for any element outside of himself. But the situation was that Neo didn't know where to start. First, he asked himself a question. Is there a system within our body, like that of computers, that can restart the system and begin free of viruses or diseases that harm the body? Neo, who had long searched outside of himself for the solution to many problems, began to realize that there was a world he explored very little, the inner world. And what a surprise for him, that everything he sought outside himself was only reflections of how vast that inner world was. That's where it all began. Neo began to learn about a meditation method that combined breathing and exposure to the cold, which could potentially cure any disease. For him, this discovery marked a breakthrough in his search. I knew something existed, Mr. Neo exclaimed. It was then that he decided not to stop until the world knew what would lead to the return home and the awakening from the illusions of the world he lived in. The present, more than a verb tense. It all began with a dream within a dream that Neo had that night. He was fast asleep when suddenly a question arose within that dream and repeated in his head. What if you weren't sleeping, and what you call life is a long dream from which you haven't awakened? Suddenly, a light emerged from the center of his body, revealing a hologram of himself that showed him his life, or what he called real life. The voice returned and told him, that is not your real life. It is just an illusion that you can believe is real. In reality, when you understand that it is an illusion, you can do whatever you want with it. You can make decisions and choose what you want to experience, because you can control that illusion. It depends on you what you want to do with it. When you understand this, you can have control of time, just as you do in what you call dreams, which transport you from one point to another without anything controlling you. You can achieve whatever you want without any problems within the illusion that you call real life. From that moment, he began to believe in the possibility that those words from the dream were real, so he started to investigate, and to his surprise, he was not the only one who thought this could be real. Edgar, the wise man, came into his life through a person he met at a security job. He never would have thought that the person who brought the master into his life would be the one, given the lifestyle he had led a year before. When he heard from Ramo again, he was a completely different person, talking about the here and now, about the present as the only time we have, among other interesting topics. His transformation as a person drew a particular interest from Neo, who liked Buddhist philosophy. So, little by little, he began to understand the concepts that the Master Edgar spoke about. The control of thoughts, the present moment, spiritual awakening, and living life from within. It all seemed like a combination of quantum physics and spirituality. The Master always emphasized that we should become observers, contemplate more than meditate, and synchronize with the harmony of life. He said of accepting the moment, living with detachment, and surrendering to the flow of life. I didn't understand some concepts, but I found them so interesting that I never stopped analyzing, questioning, and assimilating. It was then that he realized that for all the questions he asked himself, the answers somehow appeared, whether in a book, a video, or through a person. From then on, he began to discover and synchronize with the whole, or so he thought. His life continued between the knowledge he absorbed and what escaped him, perhaps because his brain was not ready or considered it less important at that moment. Gio, another master, was less formal than the previous one. During his talks, he made jokes, but they were very deep, worldly in character, but very spiritual. This master led him to situations that made him question almost his entire existence. He discussed how our beliefs, culture, education, and the historical moment of our birth influence our reactions. Gio once said, "Many people who lived in the Middle Ages lived and died thinking the earth was flat. Because of this belief, they made an erroneous concept true for them. He used this as a basis to propose the thesis that we have acquired concepts that do not allow us to see and understand a deeper reality than the one we know. For that reason, With the knowledge we have acquired, we often think we have enough tools to understand life. Gio would say, "We know nothing, but our arrogance questions and even dares to blame the source, which is millions of years older than us." He would emphasize with a smile how much arrogance our ego has. If only we would awaken from that deep sleep and live in the present, the sacred instant, the holy moment. Herein lies all wisdom. Why continue to live in the past if it doesn't even exist anymore? Everything that is happening in your life exists in a single moment, and it is called the present. Nothing happens outside the present. If you understood this concept, you wouldn't have to look for anything else. The conferences and personal motivation talks would be over, because this is where life itself lies. The present is the only thing we have, and all time is an extension of the present. Unfortunately, we don't realize it and prefer to live in a simulation. At times, he could see that the spiritual masters contradicted each other, but they did not consider themselves the absolute owners of the truth. For example, Tipak the Indian said it was impossible to clear the mind and stop thinking. When you tell a person to stop thinking, they can't, because the very command you are giving the mind is a thought. Edgar, on the contrary, said that thoughts were like noise in our minds that we should learn to control. And Gio said that it didn't matter, that if there were thoughts, and one was conscious of the moment, of that precise instant, then it was a good sign that one was in the present. Also, if something bothered you, and you eventually became aware of it, and lived the experience consciously, then this prepared you to overcome that situation. Gio considered this a necessary situation created by life for you to understand it, but if you didn't understand it, it would appear in your life again as a new opportunity for growth. Master Gio always said, "How generous and kind life is. It continually offers us the opportunity to learn. The source never stops giving you new opportunities. It is inexhaustible." The contradiction between the masters was rooted in some points of view, which, according to them, were not relevant because, sometimes, due to perception, we think we are right and cannot cling to anything as absolute truth. This way of thinking was highly valued by Neo because, in this case, there was nothing to defend. He had known this approach in Buddhism as detachment. Tipak considered detachment essential for spiritual growth, as well as defenselessness, gratitude, karma, the law of cause and effect, among other important points he mentioned. For Tipak, desire was essential when trying to achieve something. For Gio, it was a symbol of suffering because he considered desire a feeling outside the present, and everything outside the present generates suffering. In this new awakening of consciousness, not only are there spiritual leaders with a new philosophical current, but also intellectual figures with scientific characteristics are involved. For example, Dr. Marcos, a neurosurgeon, spoke of the awakening of consciousness with results proven in medicine. The doctor discussed fear with us, drawing on his scientific knowledge, and explained that at a low level, it is healthy because it is an innate mechanism in every human being. Beyond that level, fear is our worst enemy, because it blocks parts of the brain, and sometimes paralyzes reasoning. Uncontrolled fear prevents us from taking risks to learn new things, thereby hindering a process in the brain called neuroplasticity, which is the generation of new neurons within the brain. Many masters define fear as a lack of love, a lack of faith, or the worst enemy of spiritual growth. Dr. Marcos had found that with his methods of controlled meditation, one could reach unimagined levels of concentration and mental power. He assured that with machines that scanned different parts of the brain at the moment of meditation, one could reach frequency levels that were almost unattainable and undetectable by the machines. On one occasion, he said it was impressive what could be done with the brain and said that we were capable of creating our future from the present. He had already heard this from other scientists who corroborated this finding in some universities. They said that sensory images helped people achieve their goals, like Dr. Marcos. They said that the mind did not differentiate between what was happening in the imagination and what was happening outside of it. They even stated that the same stimuli experienced in our body during a simulation exercise also occurred when it was conducted on any training field. The muscles and heart pounded as if the simulation were happening in real time. That was when Neo asked himself another question. Why, if Jesus, Buddha, Lao Tzu, Plato, Socrates, and other great philosophers, very few, by the way, reached impressive levels of inner searching, are there still so few of us today who can achieve it? Then he discovered that the answer was already included in the question. And he said, what we must do is rephrase the question, and we will find the answer. We will reach impressive levels when we search inwardly. Spiritual levels are timeless. They have no time. They are there waiting for whoever wants to find them. It is a privilege that is not exclusive to anyone, and everyone who wants to can achieve it. There is a world that has been waiting immutably for our return and for the awakening from the deep sleep in which we find ourselves, and from the illusions of a world that is not real. All of this said before, well, almost all of it, instead crumbled when the nameless master entered the scene and told him, question everything said before, don't believe any of it, and experience your path, not what they have told you and conditioned you with. Then he said, if meditation and psychological time make you a better man, you are falling into a trap because you are contradicting the now. The moment you are going to become spiritually better through them, you are involving a projection of time, which means you are not in the present, in the only instant that exists. If you understand this, wouldn't it be better to contemplate, involving all the senses, and enter an inner silence that takes you to that higher consciousness in the instant you are in, where the past, present, and future are contained in the now, and in this way eliminate the conflicts that psychological time gives you? He continued and told him again, observe yourself carefully when you try to be a good man, an exemplary citizen, a preacher. Stay alert, because the ego can hide in one of those characters, and then you would enter another drama, thinking you have evolved. When you understand that there is nothing to evolve into because you are already pure consciousness, then you will be free from suffering and conflict. It is difficult to express this in words, because words are just minimal and simplistic descriptions of what a higher consciousness truly represents, and it would be impossible to describe that with this explanation. You have to live it yourself. No word can explain this feeling.